We just got a new video from the official Dungeons & Dragons YouTube channel talking about the next playtest material pack, and there are a lot of interesting stuff in here that I'd like to talk a bit about. Obviously, we're going to get the playtest material later today, the day this video comes up, and I'll also probably make a video on that and be excited to see what's in there. But for right now, I think there's enough exciting stuff in this announcement video that I actually want to talk about. First is that we are going to get some changes to the inspiration and critical role rules that we got in the first Unearthed Arcana.
We're largely using the 2014 version of the rule, with the catch that this time we're testing rolling a 1 on a d20, giving you inspiration.
In this version of the rules, it's not gonna be on a roll of a d20, so it's instead gonna be a roll on a 1 that you get that inspiration, and I think that is an actual improvement because you're not gonna want to fail, so it'll probably not lead as much to you rolling just to get inspiration, and it'll also feel really good to fail a roll, which obviously feels bad, but then get inspiration so you can maybe get more lucky on your next roll. And I think that's an improvement on what they gave us in the first Unearthed Arcana and something that I'm personally more excited about. The critical rules are also going to be rolled back to normal, as far as I understand Jeremy Crawford, which means that you will no longer have no crits on spell attacks, and monsters will also be able to crit, and you will apply all of your critical roll damage as you would in the normal 5e rules. So they're basically saying we responded to some feedback, but also now we're going to try out this, and then we'll see if people like this better.
We're focused on our friends, the Bard, the Ranger, and the Rogue, along with, as you mentioned, a bunch of feats, because each of these classes, like all of the classes in the game, has the option at certain levels of taking feats, including the new ability score improvement feat.
Another thing that's mentioned is that the playtest pack is going to include a lot of feats, and that ASIs, where you increase your ability scores, is now a feat you can take and not something you get as a standard and then you can take an optional feat. And I think that's an interesting or better way to do it, where they flip it around. So it's not about choosing an ASI that you can then, if your DM allows it, take a feat instead. Now you take a feat and that feat can be an ASI. I still think it's kind of sad that ASIs have to compete with feats, because ASIs is probably often the better choice, but feats are probably often the more fun and interesting choice, and I'd rather that they gave us ASIs separately from feats, so it's not competing between the two, because I, as a DM, prefer that my players take feats because it's just more interesting for their characters.
This UA also includes the Arcane, Divine, and Primal spell lists all the way up to level 9.
So I think that's great. We're going to get a look at the spell list, the complete spell list, which will also tell us which spells are they going to keep. Are they going to add some new ones perhaps already? And are there some spells that deserve to be scrapped or maybe rolled into one? I can name a lot of spells that I would prefer actually not be in the game. So it'll be interesting to see what they'll do there. But yeah, it's a good thing that we're going to get spell lists for each of these spell types, Arcane, Divine, and Primal, and I'm excited to see that.
Each of these classes is now a part of a group in this playtest. The Ranger, the Rogue, and the Bard are part of what's currently called the Expert group. So hence the name of this Unearthed Arcana, the Expert classes. In future Unearthed Arcanas, you're going to see the other class groups featured, but we wanted to start with the Experts.
Now, the final and most interesting piece of information we get in this video is that they are gonna group classes together. And in this first or the next playtest we're gonna get the Expert classes. So that's the Rogue, the Ranger, and the Bard. So what we can understand from Crawford is that each group of classes have sort of a distinctive feature. For the Experts, it's expertise and skills. So they are the only core classes that are going to get expertise, as far as I understand, which means that they'll be better at some skills than others. Crawford also tells us that the Experts are going to be classes that can sort of borrow from other classes, so that makes sense for the Bard's Magical Secrets feature that it used to have in 5e. It's probably going to have something like that in this playtest as well. And I can see that also makes sense for the Ranger, where it borrows maybe some divine magic from the Druid or some fighting skills from the Barbarian and Fighter. And I can also see it for the Rogue, where it maybe borrows something from the Fighter. Perhaps it can borrow something from the Wizard. You have the Arcane Trickster subclass and stuff like that. So there are some ways that I can see this fit, but I'm very excited to see the UA when it comes out later today, how they actually implement this stuff. Now, what I think is really interesting about grouping the character classes into different groups is that we sort of get a moniker for what type of character we can expect, and we have a through line that tells us this is this kind of character, and that's really, really nice, as Jeremy Crawford also mentions, for new players, for parties trying to decide what characters do we need, which character should I play, where you can say we need an expert, we need a mage, and we need a priest, and we need a warrior, and those are the 4 kinds of characters: warriors, mages, priests, and experts, and it'll cover the 12 base classes we also got in the 5e Player's Handbook. Now, Crawford doesn't mention which classes are which in this video, but if I had to guess, I'd say that the warlock, sorcerer, and wizard are going to be your mages. That one's pretty easy. And I think that the priests are going to cover the cleric and the druid, and that's my guess, the paladin. And I think that's because the priests are going to have channel divinity as their common feature. Again, I'm just guessing here. And that would make sense for the paladin to be lumped in with the druid and the cleric, and the druid's channel divinity would probably be something like wild shape. So that's folded into that. Again, I'm only guessing. And that would leave the warriors as the monk, the fighter, and the barbarian. Now, I could be wrong. It could be possibly a paladin and a monk switching places. So the paladin is a warrior and the monk is a priest. I can also see that make kind of sense.
So you're going to see in this very Unearthed Arcana, some of the feats, for instance, have certain class groups as prerequisites. You'll see a feat where it says you maybe need to be a member of the expert or the warrior group to take this feat. What that does is it allows us to serve up options to multiple classes simultaneously, and also serve classes like the artificer that might not be in the same book as the 12 classes that are in the player's handbook. Because since we indicate here in this UA that the artificer counts as an expert, that means anything that members of that group qualify for, the artificer qualifies for. And if we were ever to make a new class and put it into one of these groups, then suddenly it is able to tap into the shared tech of that group.
I think what he's talking about here is very smart. That's also one of the benefits of grouping the characters into these groups, that you can much easier add new character classes, new subclasses, new whatever to the game, and have them qualify for feats or magic items or whatever else kind of content you have that would normally have to say requires attunement by a sorcerer, wizard, or bard, or whatever it is. Now you can just say, okay, requires attunement by a mage or requires attunement by an expert, and then when you make a new character class that is an expert or mage, it's just going to fit. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And it's a good way to think about the game, where we're not only just making it a good game right now, we're also making it a game that it's easy to add to later. So we can add additional resources to it, and it's going to be much smoother than having to rewrite all of the old stuff and make erratas and say, okay, the artificers can use this item as well. So I really like that they're thinking about that stuff. I think it's clever, and I think it's a smart way that they're doing it. So yeah, that's the video. I'm very excited to see the rest of the playtest material later today, but I just wanted to give you my quick thoughts on what were said in this video, and I think it's a lot of exciting stuff. I'm very excited for that next playtest pack. If you like this video, you can subscribe by clicking at the button down there, and you'll get a lot more 5e content. And if you want to support the channel and also get a lot of cool 5e content such as encounters, adventures, apps, and all that good stuff, you can head on over to patreon.com/eventyr and become a patron. Beyond that, there's not a whole lot left to say, except thank you so much for watching, and I hope that I'll see you in the next video.